Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Coming to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. My name is John Mark Tolley, and joining me, as always, Mr. Garrett Jones. Garrett, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing better than I was a few days ago.
That's always good. Yes, no matter how you're feeling a few days ago, it's always better to be feeling
Absolutely.
better than you were. Yeah. So we are kind of doing a trend here. I noticed we're doing another top five today. Today we're looking at our top five Legends characters that should be brought over into the main canon. Now, before we get started, Garrett, why don't you just what is your kind of remembrance of Legends and that whole kind of thing? Like, what is your history with the old Legends?
So I grew up with what was considered the expanded universe. A lot of the like the Thrawn trilogy, which I'm glad that Thrawn is now officially canon. But I grew up with reading the Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, stuff like that. I grew up on the Shadows of the Empire book. I thought that was a really, really nice little bridge between the events of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I liked having that bit of story in between because they introduced some great characters. They make for some explanations that I thought would have been really, really cool to see. But I've also got some experience with the Dark Horse Clone Wars books. Because while the Clone Wars themselves are considered canon, some of the story arcs in those books are not considered, especially after Disney took over and they started doing their own thing. And there's some really cool story arcs in there, including with some of our fan favorite characters, like Quinlan Voss, for example. In fact, he repeatedly shows up in the Clone Wars graphic novels that Dark Horse put out. Now, I am missing one of those books. There's a total of 9 volumes in that collection. I've got all but volume 8, and I don't know how I missed that one. But I'm a big fan of also the Star Wars Legacy books that Dark Horse put out, which takes place about 150 years or so beyond the Battle of Yavin. And follows a descendant of Luke Skywalker by the name of Cade Skywalker, who goes off the rails, and his adventures are insane. So I'll be kind of touching on the Star Wars Legacy stuff a little bit in my list.
Yeah. So for me, and I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but while I grew up, nominally a Star Wars fan, I think everyone at one, a lot of kids of my generation, grew up kind of with Star Wars. I said this before that I don't remember like life without Star Wars. It's always just kind of been there. I can't physically remember the first time I saw A New Hope, just because it's just always kind of been in my life. But I would say the thing that made me go from being like, oh, this is pretty cool, to I love this, I want to know as much stuff as I can about this, was the books. It was specifically the Thrawn trilogy. So I do have an affinity for, the expanded universe and all that. That being said, I can see the, how it became so convoluted at some point and there needed to be some sort of fix to it. So I can understand that too, but there are a lot of characters which we're going to be talking about here in a second that we all think should be brought into canon, and we're going to be talking about our top 5. So, since you went first last time, I will be going first this time.
Sounds perfect.
And my first character, and I don't think the name is up there, it is Talon Card.
Ooh, Talon Card. I like that.
And I even have a perfect show to bring him in. I think it'd be perfect to be brought in either Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett. I think he would fit perfectly in that world, especially Book of Boba Fett with the now for those of you who don't know, he was in the expanded universe. He was the one who basically took over for after Jabba. He was kind of basically Jabba's replacement. He took over that syndicate, that whole syndicate, and was basically held that kind of position. Not necessarily as a Hutt family, but that kind of head crime lord, top guy, and is highly connected with another name which might be on this list too. But yes, first introduced in Heir to the Empire. Just a really, really cool character. Really liked him.
Yeah,
I mean, what do you think? Talon Card.
I think that's a really good pick going into the start of this list. And I didn't even consider that this particular character. And I mean, I'm familiar with him mainly because I have the vehicles and vessels guide from the role playing game back in the 90s, and one of his personal ships, was the Wild Card, and it was a fantastic looking ship, very sleek in its design, and I thought, that's kind of a cool character. I wasn't as familiar with him, but I know that he had some dealings with Lando. And so it would be a great way to either, depending on where we go with this, like if we go back into, if we do a series that takes place before the rebellion, where we could bring in Donald Glover as the young Lando. I really liked his portrayal. I think the two of them could play off of each other really well if we have someone cast well as Talon. But at the same time, if we go with an older Talon card, you could bring Billy D. Williams back in to play the older Lando. It works either way.
Yeah. So my next character is Admiral Dala.
I don't think I'm familiar with this one.
She was, and I can't remember the book story, but she started as an Imperial Admiral, and it was the storyline with the Sun Crusher. In the expanded universe, the Death Star was actually built inside the mall near around Kessel, which was like a collection of different gravitational anomalies, wormholes. But in the middle was like almost like an eye of the storm, which is where a lot of, in the old expanded universe, where a lot of secret Imperial tech was developed. And she was the head of that facility. And she later on became, after the Galactic Empire and the New Republic were kind of reorganized into the Galactic Alliance, she became Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance during the New Jedi Order period. During that period, after the Yuzing Vong War and all of that, but just kind of a really cool character, really cool Imperial. Always just kind of liked her character and how she kind of started out as kind of a bad guy, then became. I'd say she was always, even in most of the books, she was always sort of an antagonist, but she went from being just kind of basically true villain to more, not necessarily like muscle twirling villain, but still an antagonist. She still didn't trust the Jedi.
Kind of a Dedra Miro type character.
Kind of. In the, because I didn't really read. I'll be honest, I didn't really read a lot of the New Jedi Order. I kind of fell out after the Vong storyline.
Yeah. Yeah, the Yuzong Vong
just because I thought it went on for way too long. Yeah, that was very, very convoluted. Yeah, that's kind of what got me out of the whole EU for a long time. But she wanted the Jedi to be more used as a military wing, so that they would be answerable to the Senate and to her, and to the central government. whereas Luke wanted them to be more independent and to be able to do what they wanted. But her fear was that you could have another that without oversight, you had the fear of another Vader. What if there was another Vader? What if, so she wanted more oversight with the Jedi, which led to conflict between her and Luke. And that's when kind of Luke went off on his own with his son.
Yeah, and you can kind of understand her logic behind things too.
Yeah, definitely. But you can also understand Luke's too. That Luke said, Luke's idea of hey, we don't want to be answerable to someone who can manipulate us. So you can kind of see both sides of it.
Yep, you can.
So my next one is my first Sith, Exar Kun.
Woo!
Oh, I loved this character. When
I saw the teaser trailer for episode 1 back in '98. First time I saw the long shot of a double-ended lightsaber, I'm like, oh, it's Exar Kun. It wasn't. It was Darth Maul, but it was still a double-ended lightsaber.
Yes. And this is back before this. They kind of had this thing that all Sith had the Darth title idea, but still just, and the way he was initially brought in the, I believe it was the Young Jedi novels that he was brought in on.
I think so.
Yeah.
To be honest, my only experience with it is going from the weapons manual for the role-playing game. And they have a section on his specific lightsaber, which was about the same length as a standard lightsaber hilt, just double-ended.
Yeah, and how he was able to manipulate even from beyond the grave, because the first time he's brought in, he's been dead for thousands of years, but his Force essence was locked into one of these temples on Yavin 4.
Yeah,
the Masazi manipulates.
Heavy,
and he manipulates one of Luke's students, which leads to where we met our last character, Admiral Dala, because this character steals the Sun Crusher and kind of goes off on a little tirade. But yeah, Exar Kun, just a really, really cool. Oh, there's that double-bladed lightsaber. Not red though, this one not red.
Surprisingly, unlike most Sith, he did not use a red blade. He did not make it bleed.
All right, and of course, how can we not? Mara Jade.
Absolutely.
I think this is. I mean, to me, this is almost a shoo-in for. I think you ask most people that have a knowledge of the expanded universe or fans, what's one character you want to see brought in? 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear Mara Jade. We want to see Mara Jade.
Absolutely.
Spunky Emperor's Hand. Yeah. Emperor's Hand. And I love how that was explained that, Vader was the hammer and she was the scalpel. She was the one that the Emperor sent in if he needed something more precision done or something that, wasn't going to be out in the open because, Vader's kind of not exactly inconspicuous when he shows up.
Yeah.
Whereas, and the fact that they explained that she was at Jabba's palace. She was one of the dancers in disguise with her job. And, what she was supposed to do was kill Luke Skywalker. And that's how we're introduced to her was through the last command was kill Luke Skywalker. But of course, as we know, she turns to the light and ended up marrying Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, and this was always the question for me was always, who do you cast for a role like this? I mean, there's so many different actresses, especially now, that could easily portray this role, but it's like at this point, because it's been so long since Return of the Jedi, and the last time we actually see Luke as an adult I mean, sure, they could show, they could do something like what they did with Mandalorian, where he's, the post Return of the Jedi age.
Yeah.
But it still would, I don't know. It would be really interesting to see who they would cast if they brought her in.
That would be interesting. Maybe that's the one thing we could do is we can, another episode, we can go through and figure out who we would cast for some of these characters.
Casting call would be great.
Oh, and of course, my number one, again, another kind of shoe-in, Darth Revan. Old Republic character.
Absolutely.
And definitely. And when I first heard before we knew what Mandalorian was going to be, and they first heard the name, they're doing a show about Mandalorian called The Mandalorian. I think a bunch of us, at least me and a couple of other people that I talked to, thought that it was going to be the Mandalorian Wars from the Old Republic, the war between the Mandalorian and the Jedi. That's what it was going to be about, and we all thought the same thing. Are they going to bring Revan in? Are they going to bring Revan in? Are they going to bring Revan in? They haven't yet, but there's just so many opportunities, especially with, as we're going back and seeing, Acolyte coming out and all these different shows. Just, come on, just bite the bullet, Disney. Bring in this guy.
And they've already got an actor who's interested in playing the part.
Mm-hmm.
Keanu Reeves has talked on a number of times about how he would love to play this character. I think it would be so fun for him.
Yes, that would be an awesome casting. Yeah. All right. Well.
All right. So was that the last one on your list?
That was the last one on my list. All right.
Okay. So here we go. My extended universe character ports. I put a little bit of thought into this. It was a little bit tougher than I thought I would. I wanted to throw out some characters from Shadows of the Empire. I did think about Darth Revan, but ultimately I went with characters that stood out to me because they were very obscure. They're not considered fan favorites from the extended universe.
Okay. All right.
So my first one is Dirge. This is a character that shows up in the Clone Wars. The first time I've ever seen him was in the 2D animation miniseries that they did for Cartoon Network. He's this bounty hunter that's hired by the Separatists. And I think he's either in Christophsis or Munilinst, and he is just he goes toe to toe with Kenobi, and it just goes ape. They cut him apart and he heals back together. I'm not entirely sure what species he is, what he is, but he is brutal, and his suit is just nothing but weapons, almost like a Mandalorian, but not a Mandalorian. It's really weird. And so to see him on the big screen would be really kind of a cool thing, or even on a small screen basis. If they were to do something live action Clone Wars based, I think that could be really cool. They could touch base on this. But he was one of my first picks because he was just such an obscure character. And I thought, man, this guy is really cool. But if you look, the sigil on his chest looks like the Mandalorian crest.
It kind of does, yeah.
And so I always thought maybe this guy was a Mandalorian, but he's not, as far as I'm aware. I'd have to do a little bit more research, but I couldn't really find a whole lot on him. My next two, my number 4 and my number 3 pick, go hand in hand. These are Carnus Muir and Celeste Morn. Now, their story arc actually picks up in a 2-part graphic novel series put out by Dark Horse called Vector, which includes portions from Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars Rebellion, and a couple of other books, including Star Wars Legacy. And so it crosses over, and Carnus Muir is a Sith Lord from the very old Republic. He predates Yoda by thousands of years. And so does Celeste Morn. And the talisman, that gold spider-looking thing on Muir's chest plate, It was something that he had created, and it generated this plague called the rat ghoul plague. And so any species that is exposed to it in its radiation for any length of time, unless they were a force user, because having the force protected you, it would actually transform you into a rat ghoul. It's like this bug-like zombie monster. If you get bit or scratched by one of these things, you turn. If you're exposed to this medallion, you turn. And eventually what happens is Celeste gets her hands on it because she tries to stop Muir, and she ends up becoming possessed by his spirit. And so she's fighting his spirit while trying to control the rat ghoul. And eventually she has encounters with Vader on a couple of occasions. And he goes in with his entire platoon, his 501st Brigade, and she decimates them. They all turn into rat ghouls, and he has to kill every single one of his soldiers. And she's not doing it deliberately. It's just because she's possessed by Carnus Muir, as well as it's the proximity to the talisman. And it's such a cool story. And how many different generations of characters that it covers. So these are my number 4 and my number 3 pick. My number 2 pick is Asharid Het. This is a character that pops up in the Clone Wars. He also pops up again in Star Wars Legacy. He is a Jedi who turns Sith Lord. And he has a very interesting history. He's a human, or mostly human, raised by Tusken Raiders. And so when you're introduced to him in the Clone Wars books, he wears the mask of a Tusken Raider. His lightsabers were designed to look like Gatterfies. And so he there's one scene where he and Anakin are on a desert planet together, and Anakin has PTSD and starts trying to kill Het, thinking it's just another Tusken Raider.
Oh, wow.
Eventually, he kind of loses it. He gets captured by the Yuuzhan Vong. He's experimented on. He ends up getting whatever that disease is that they were spreading. And he learns how to slow it down, but only by turning to the dark side. And so he becomes a Sith Lord by the time you get to the Star Wars Legacy era. And he calls himself Darth Krayt, as in the Krayt Dragons of Tatooine.
Okay. So this is Darth Krayt. Yeah,
so this is Darth Krayt. And he is the guy who tries to he rebuilds the one Sith, so he has the rule of one, so where all the Sith are united, and he tries to sway Cade Skywalker to his side, and loses epically. Really, really enjoyed this character because just such a cool, unique development and story arc.
Yeah.
Of course, my number 1. I don't think it's going to be anybody. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by this. For anybody who's watched or listened and heard me talk about this, but I'm a big fan of The Force Unleashed, and of course, my number 1 is going to be Star Killer. And any chance to have Sam Witwer, I almost blinked on his name. Any chance to have Sam Witwer back in the franchise in live action is fine in my book. And so if we could get him back to play Star Killer in a live action adaptation, I would love it. The best live action adaptation we could possibly fit him into right now would hands down be Mandalorian.
Yes.
Or maybe The Acolyte, because I'm not really sure when that's set. So it could work out either way, but he did such a great thing with this character. There's such a nuance of personality. You could see why he turned to the dark side because he was raised in it, but you could also see why he flipped and went to the light, and he's dealing with all those conflicting emotions. And so he's not exactly Jedi, he's not exactly Sith. He's walking that really fine line, but he's got such an amazing array of talent and skill that I think he would be a really cool character to have on screen.
Definitely. So
those are my 5.
Those are your picks. Those are really good. I like those. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because watching you, I'm thinking of other characters that I could I could have brought that guy in. Oh, that person would have been cool. And there's even characters that are canon. We haven't necessarily seen them on screen yet.
Yeah.
We haven't, we haven't seen. I can't think of the guy's name. He's from the new Jedi games.
Cal Kestis.
Cal Kestis. We haven't seen Cal Kestis yet.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the archaeologist.
Oh, Dr. Aphra.
We haven't seen Dr. Aphra yet. I mean, I think she would be a cool character to see show up. And expect Mandalorian. See her show up in Mandalorian would be awesome.
You know what? Aphra is one of those characters I have in my headcanon. I've actually got a couple of actresses I think would be really good for the part. While I think Aubrey Plaza has the right
look. Who would that be?
Well, Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Rec, I think she's got the right look, but like persona and attitude wise, I think she'd be a little bit too smarmy. My other selection, I think right off the top of my head, would be Olivia Munn.
Ooh.
I think she would be a really good fit. I mean, she's got the dark hair, she's got the personality for it, and I think, and she's a good enough actress. I think she could pull it off.
And she has the nerd cred.
She does have that.
She has the nerd cred.
She does have that, and I can see an actress like Olivia Munn, especially facing off, and being able to kind of verbally spar with Vader and still get him to do what she needs him to do without him being like too pissy and trying to kill her.
Yeah. Well, one thing I like that Disney has kind of done when it comes to bringing, the possibility of bringing characters in from the old expanded universe, is they've never really shut it down completely. They kind of said that, this is, Legends are over here, and we'll kind of, if we see a character, we'll bring it, like they did with Thrawn. They kind of saw this character and kind of says, hey, this is a cool, people like this guy, let's bring him in and let's work him into the canon.
Well, I think that plays more into them simply just trusting Dave Filoni, because Dave Filoni was the one who's been bringing in these extended universe characters and making them canon since Disney's takeover. And the fact that they trust him to do that, and between him and Jon Favreau, I think that's a smart move on their part. And I honestly, I don't know how you feel about Kathleen Kennedy, but I don't think she's really doing that strong of a job. And I think that with Iger coming back, I think it would be a smart move on his part to cut the ties with her and just hand over the reins to Favreau and Filoni.
Yeah, I don't know, because I look at, and not to go into weeds too much, because we can do a whole episode on Kathleen Kennedy, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, because part of it, at one point you look at it and you can look at her filmography, and she's behind some of the biggest movies in history. Whether, at some point or another. I mean, you put her, she has her name behind, every one of the Back to the Futures, all the Jurassic Park movies, all the Star Wars movies, including the ones before the sequels, Back to the Future. So she's had her name behind, as an executive producer of some sort, pretty much all of the biggest movies that you can think of.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I don't know. I go back and forth between Kathleen. How much, because it's one of those things that when a when the meat is bad and people don't like it, they're quick to point the finger. But when something is good, it's obviously this was Filoni, obviously this was Favreau, and that's why it's so good. But then when people don't necessarily like it, there's no mention of Filoni or Favreau, and all the fingers point to Kathleen.
Well, yes and no. I mean, Favreau got some flack with the way that things took place during Book of Boba Fett, but I think that's a conversation for another time, because at that point, we're starting to sway into different territory other than what we're talking about, and we're working on a timeline here.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's table that discussion for another time.
Yep.
And let's just kind of wrap things up here. And Garrett, where do you tell the people out there where they can find you?
Well, you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at GKJ_publishing. That's where I post stuff about my books. I post about my YouTube channel, which you can find me on YouTube at GKJ Publishing. Simple branding. On that channel, I do top 10 book recommendations. I do author interviews, which I just had one last weekend. I do creative writing tips, which this season we're focusing on world building. And then this actual coming weekend, this Saturday, I will be doing a live stream on Instagram at around 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you are interested in tuning into that, that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just going to be talking about what I'm working on, and as far as writing, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Yes, it should be for us right here. If you want to get a hold of us, the best way to do it is our email, which is warofthestars@gmail.com. That is also our Twitter handle at warofthestars1. Check us out there, and also check us out on Facebook. Just follow us at War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, and join our Facebook group and join the conversation there. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/War of the Stars is our Patreon page, or you can check us out at our Spreadshirt shop, spreadshirt.com/shop/War of the Stars. The link will be in all the description of all our social media pages. If you want to check us out on YouTube, check us out on our YouTube page. We have a YouTube page. Check us out there. There's the app for us at War of the Stars 9510, or just search War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Look for the War of the Stars logo. Remember to like and subscribe, and click that notification bell for all future shows that will be coming up.
Red 5 Network.
Red 5 Network, yes, the Red 5 Network. We are part of Red 5 Network. Go to red5network.com for all the shows that are part of the Red 5 Network. A bunch of cool guys on there, a bunch of cool shows. If you want to listen, check us out on our podcast page. We're on all major podcast platforms. Just go to wherever you get your podcast at and search for War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Look for the War of the Stars logo and check us out there. And that is it. So next week, I believe, and things will be our last show for the holiday break. So are we still going to be doing the live stream, I think? Are we up for that? Or?
I'm up for it.
All right. Well, next week is going to be a treat. Well, depending on what you consider a treat. We are going to be at least attempting to live stream the holiday special with you guys. Don't know how well that's going to work out. We're working in new territories. Hopefully we don't get the big hammer by Disney telling us, nope, you can't do that.
Yeah, I know. That would be awful.
Yeah, but we're going to try that, and might have a special guest next week too, depending on if we can work something out. Foreshadowing. So until next time, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
This is the way.